has agreed to plead guilty to 2 misdemeanor tax offences and admit to illegally owning a gun. Well, the charges arose from an investigation started by a US attorney that was appointed by Donald Trump. Well, Hunter Biden is expected to agree to drug treatment and monitoring. Well, the terms of the agreement are likely to keep him out of jail. That has infuriated Republicans. Here's House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
If you are the president's leading political opponent, the DOJ tries to literally put you in jail and give you prison time. If you are the president's son, you get a sweetheart deal.
Well, let's speak now to former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno. Joe, good to have you with us. So if I look at the penalty for some of those alleged charges, the gun charge, 10 years in jail, a fine of $250,000. But we are led to believe that this deal will mean he avoids jail altogether. What do you make of it?
Well, that's most likely correct. The tax charges appear to be misdemeanors, not felonies. So the likelihood of getting jail time on those two is very low. Most likely, like you say, it's paying a fine and some interest and, of course, paying the back taxes. As far as the gun charge, it appears to be through a diversion program, which is exceedingly rare, at least in my experience, practicing in Washington and in Virginia, whereby basically the individual, as long as he has no further offenses, the charges are effectively dropped after, I believe, a 2-year period. So as long as he's good, there should be no jail time there as well.
Republican lawmakers are not happy, though. We heard from one of them there suggesting that Joe Biden is weaponizing the Justice Department against political opponents. Do they have a point?
Well, look. There is no solution to this situation that would have made everyone happy, right? Anything that happened to Hunter Biden, the Republicans would likely say that it was being too lenient. And if they went harder on him, they would say they're overcompensating because he's the president's son. I personally am a little uncomfortable with Republicans saying something like that they know better than the prosecutors as to how this case is being handled. But look, anytime you have something like this, where you have a family member of a sitting president facing charges by that president's Justice Department, there'll always be some number of people that say there's a conflict of interest and it shouldn't happen like this, particularly since we had a pretty aggressive case against Donald Trump just a few weeks ago.
Well, yeah, and interesting, though, the reason that they may think that is because the investigation was started by the lawyer that was appointed by Donald Trump. So they will say right from the outset this was a partisan case.
Well, I think that was a smart move on President Biden's behalf to have some degree of arm's length to say, look, like you say, this was a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, and therefore he was given latitude to bring the case wherever he thought it should go. That being said, it's not the same as a special counsel, which we haven't really had here in several decades, a true independent counsel. We have special counsels, but the fact of the matter is, all these federal prosecutors ultimately lead to the attorney general and the president. So I know President Biden wants to say this was independent, but the fact is he has to stand behind both cases effectively.
Yeah, Joe, stay with us. Let's bring in Peter and Amanda. And Amanda, there was no way that this was not going to get even more political, was there?
That's right. There was no way, even though it's been a 5-year case. Folks have been working on this for a really long time. We knew no matter what was said about Hunter Biden, it was going to be a political matter. We're in a very intense political cycle. And of course, not to mention that Trump is currently being investigated by the Department of Justice. And so, of course, this was going to be a moment for Republicans to have something to say, especially because it's very difficult at the moment to talk about what is happening in the Trump case at this period of time.
Yes, and we're going to come on to that in just a second, of course, because we now have that date, don't we, for that first part of the trial. And Peter, talk to me here about the challenge of separating the politics from the justice. When there is so much tension, we are approaching what could be a presidential election year. I mean, there's so many challenges, but separating politics and justice just isn't one of them right now.
Particularly not in the American system. I'm far from an expert. But the fact that it is presidential appointees in the justice system inevitably brings politics into it. I'd like to say that in the UK system, prosecutors are civil servants, and there is less of that political dimension, although every case involving a senior politician here gets extremely partisan as well. The other reflection occurs to me is that it seems to me the Republicans are stretching a point a bit where they're trying to establish some kind of comparability between the charges against Hunter Biden and the charges leveled against Trump for the national security case that he's involved in. They are very, very different orders of magnitude, in my view.
Yeah, and Amanda, I mean, there's an irony here, isn't there, that the Republicans are calling this a sweetheart deal, allowing the Justice Department to turn a blind eye to corruption, especially given all the allegations levelled at President Trump.
That's right. And it's important to note, not all Republicans. Bill Barr has come out and talked about the realities of what Trump is up against and the seriousness of the charges against him and what has been in the indictment. So it's not all Republicans. And I think more and more we're going to start to see Republicans really, as they dig deeper into the case, begin to understand what really is at stake when we're talking about President Trump. But there's no doubt that right now it makes it easy to talk about something else because Hunter Biden is in the news.
Yeah. And Joe, final thought from you. What happens next here?
Well, I know that the case nominally is set now for trial in August of this year. I would frankly be shocked if it goes to trial in August of next year. I mean, even simple federal cases take a long time to go to trial. Then you have ones here with a former president and dealing with classified information. I would be shocked if this case really goes to trial before next year's presidential election.
Yeah, Joe, stay with us, because as Amanda touched on, we now finally have that date, don't we, the initial trial date. It comes alongside those charges that have been levied against President Trump. The judge now setting the date, August the 14th, as the initial trial date for the former president's federal trial. Remember, he's been indicted on charges of willfully retaining classified government records and obstructing justice, while the special counsel had promised a speedy trial. Well, he's been speaking to Fox News in an exclusive interview for them. He gave a new excuse for having the classified documents in his house. Have a listen.
I have every right to have those boxes. This is purely a Presidential Records Act. This is not a criminal thing. I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to NARA yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
So he was very busy. He was also questioned on a range of other topics, including the 2020 election, which the former president said this about.
First of all, I won in 2020 by a lot, okay? Let's get that straight. I won in 2020.
So, Amanda, so much for us to talk about there. First of all, the excuses for why he had these documents. He said he was getting all of his personal items out of these boxes before he was going to hand them back. It's taken him quite a while to do that, hasn't it?
It sure has. It's also taken quite a while for him to figure out what story he wants to go with. At the beginning, he didn't have classified, then he can classify all things, and then it was here, and then it wasn't there, and now we have the latest message, which is that he was trying to get his personal items out of the bins that he had. I mean, this is the part that I think the American people are going to struggle with as this case continues, is what is the real story? Does this begin to get just tiring when people are looking for inspiration and vision during a presidential election?
Yeah, Peter, I mean, we've all seen those pictures now of those boxes piled up in the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago. They were piled up in the bathrooms at Mar-a-Lago. But President Trump says, look, he just didn't have time to get round to sort them out yet. We've all been there, haven't we, with piles of stuff that we need to do. We just keep putting off.
Well, I think if I'd had piles of top secret material in my bathroom, I would probably be in some trouble. And I'm not sure I'd had them mixed up with my golf kit either, which is a little bit the story that the ex-president now seems to be running. I mean, I think it's completely shocking to see the scale of the classified information that was in Mar-a-Lago. I honestly struggle to find much in the new excuses. I think there's a very serious issue here. A lot of that will have been of concern to US allies as well. So this is a very, very serious case.
Yeah, and Joe, the timing of it interesting too now. So that trial, or the first part of the trial, August the 14th, that could be right in the middle of campaigning and the first presidential debate, or certainly the Republican debate.
Well, I mean, no one should expect that the political animus around this case, as well as the case in New York City and possible future cases Donald Trump might face, that's not going away anytime soon. If anything, it's going to be just animated and accelerated as we get into campaign season. And look, from my perspective, I think it's a shame that more and more people are losing confidence in the judicial system. And it's not through anyone's fault. Frankly, it's just the unfortunate series of events that are happening right now. But you are seeing the byproduct of all of this is that more and more people feel like the justice system is not meted out fairly. And I really hope that as these cases resolve, that will dissipate, and people will see that, in fact, the laws are generally carried out and enforced adequately and fairly, and hopefully some of this political sort of distress that we're feeling kind of subsides.